I'm on my way home from work today when I observe something a little odd. I take the highway to work in the morning, usually because I'm running late. But every afternoon when I leave my job at Best Value Hardware and Appliance, I drive the long way home, taking all of the back roads just to avoid the hustle and bustle of work and school traffic. And every day, I see the same houses and the same familiar faces. But not today. Today on my drive home, I noticed that one of the houses on Bristol Lane looks different. There's a large for sale sign in the middle of the front lawn. Just a few days ago, I saw a woman outside that house watering her garden and a little boy riding his bike in the driveway. I don't know them, but it kind of feels like I do, because they are out there the same time every single day. The lady is always wearing a pretty dress with bright colors while watering the garden, and she waves at me as I drive by. The little boy is usually out there as well, but he's not always riding his bike. Sometimes I'll see him on the porch reading a book or driving his cars down the stairs, and sometimes he's helping his mother in the garden. The last 6 months that I've been working at the hardware store, there hasn't been a day that I've driven by after work that they haven't been out there. But for the past 3 days, there has been no sign of them. No gray Buick sitting in the open garage, no rocking chair on the porch rocking back and forth each time a gentle wind blows, and no one watering the yellow-orange marigolds. They are just sitting there lonely, swaying in the breeze. Now the house is for sale. I haven't seen any sign of them moving, no boxes, no moving truck in the driveway, and usually there's a ton of trash sitting at the curb on trash day when someone moves out. When I turn onto my street at 5:24 p.m., I spot my 70-year-old neighbor, Mr. Palmer, strolling down his walkway to the mailbox. I pull into my driveway, step out of my tan Toyota Corolla, and cross the grass into his yard, making sure to step over the row of flowers that his wife has just planted. "Good evening," I say, greeting him with a warm smile. He asks me how work was, and I reply it was fine, just like I do every day when he asks. Then we chat for a few minutes about our day and make plans to go fishing together that Saturday at the community lake. He says that he just bought a new fishing rod and he wants to try it out. I tell him that I'll bring lunch and beers for the two of us. Then Mrs. Palmer strolls out the front door of their brick one-story ranch-style home. I hear their Pomeranian, Lola's, high-pitched barks and then spot her in the picture window of their living room. I greet Mrs. Palmer with a wave, and she smiles sweetly before snatching the pile of mail from Mr. Palmer's hands. She quickly searches through it, mumbling, "I told you I was expecting a letter from my sister today." I've known the Palmers for a long time. They've lived next door since I was a young boy. I grew up here, moved across the country to go to college, and then moved back here with my wife and children after my parents died. My mother passed away first of a heart attack, and then my father lived here all alone until he passed away 3 years later from natural causes. I'm an only child, so of course the house along with everything else of theirs was left to me. I had the choice to sell it, but my wife was getting tired of living the city life. She'd been pestering me to move for a while before my parents passed away. Our two boys, Elijah and Isaiah, were less than thrilled when they found out we were moving. San Diego was all they had ever known. When we moved in, my wife Mindy instantly fell in love with the house and the small town. "Oh, Jeff, I love it here," she tells me one day when I stroll in after work. Mindy and my mother never got along, and she doesn't have a very good relationship with her own mother, so she was delighted when she met Mrs. Palmer. They became very close friends. My wife goes over there to check on her almost every day. She makes sure to call to see if she needs anything from the grocery store whenever she is on her way out somewhere, and she even accompanies her to her appointments so that she doesn't have to go alone. Mr. Palmer is a homebody and doesn't like to run everyday errands. But what she looks most forward to is every Sunday evening. We all sit down and have dinner together. We've been doing it every Sunday for the past 6 years. Mrs. Palmer says a quick goodbye and then saunters back up the walkway. "See you later," Mr. Palmer says just as Mindy and the boys pull into the driveway. The boys bust out of the car and begin tossing a football back and forth on the front lawn. Then Mindy exits the car, kicks her door closed because her hands are full, and announces, Pizza for dinner. Again, I think to myself. We'd been eating a lot of fast food lately, ever since Mindy got a part-time job. I used to look forward to coming home to her home-cooked meals after work each day, and I was really starting to miss them. All of the fast food was really beginning to take a toll on me. I just had to buy some bigger pants. The next morning, I'm on my way to drop the boys off at school when I turn onto Holbrook Road, a familiar street that I drive down nearly every day, and I see that every other house on the block has a for sale sign on the lawn. I just drove down this street yesterday, and there may have been 1 or 2 empty houses, but I think I would have noticed if there were this many. That's not something you just overlook. The driveways are void of any vehicles. There are no curtains providing privacy from the bypassers driving or walking past. The whole block looks deserted. As I near the end of the street, I spot one lonely SUV in one of the driveways. Then a man comes out of the house and heads toward the car. I get a close-up as we near the corner, and he waves as I drive past, so I return the gesture. He has an eerie grin plastered on his face, and he continues to give a robotic wave until we turn the corner. "Dad, who is that creepy guy?" Elijah asks as he peers out the window from the back seat. I answer, "I don't know, bud." I drop the boys off at school and head to work. When I arrive, the store is fairly empty. We don't get many customers this early in the day, but between the employees stocking shelves and running the registers up front, and the small amount of customers we do get, the store is usually decently crowded. My boss approaches me as I'm clocking in and tells me that 3 people didn't show up for work today: Tom, Richard, and Anthony. The names don't ring a bell, and I give him a confused look. "Have you heard from any of them? They were just here yesterday." "Did they tell you they weren't coming in today?" he asks me. I shake my head no and go on about my business. While driving down Bristol Lane on my way home from work that night, I see the same strange man that I saw this morning. He's standing at the trunk of his vehicle wearing a black suit and tie. He's holding a briefcase, but tosses it into the open trunk as I get closer. Then he leans down into the trunk and retrieves something. As I drive past, I see that he's now holding another for sale sign. He doesn't wave this time, but smiles at me with that same creepy grin as before. The house he is standing in front of looks vaguely familiar. I know I've seen it before, but that could have just been from driving past it so often. When I get home, the boys are playing soccer with their friends at one of the neighbors. I cross the street and approach my neighbor Jim, who is sitting on his front porch with Mr. Palmer watching the kids. Jim has 4 boys of his own. After talking with them for a few minutes, I ask, "Have you noticed all of the vacant houses in the community?" Jim replies, "I've only seen a few. I know the Andersons that lived 3 houses down just moved. Didn't say a thing, just up and left yesterday." I glance down the street at the house he's referring to and see another for sale sign posted in the yard. "The Andersons? I'm not sure that I knew them," I tell him. He looks at me with a funny look. "Of course you knew them. Richard Anderson. You guys worked together at the hardware store." That was one of the names my boss had mentioned earlier, but it still wasn't resonating with me. Mr. Palmer slaps me on the shoulder and says with a laugh, "You're just getting old. I forget everyone and everything too." That night at dinner, I asked Mindy if she knew the Andersons had moved. She gives me a strange look. "I don't know any Andersons," she says. Then I act like I remember them and repeat what Jim said. "I worked with Richard down at the hardware store. He didn't mention anything about moving, just up and left yesterday." "Did you say Richard? Was his wife Lori?" "I didn't know their last name was Anderson," she replies. "Yeah, I think that was her name," I lie. I have no idea what his wife's name was, or if he even had one. I can't even remember him. Then I mention how on my way home I've been noticing an excessive amount of vacant houses on 2 different streets in the community. "Haven't you noticed?" I ask her in a panicked tone. She brushes it off as though it's not a big deal. "Calm down. Yes, I've noticed, But people up and move all of the time. Maybe they have some family issues that no one knows about. Or maybe they need the money. Or they could have found a better job and relocated. I argue, no, it's not that. How in the world do you know? She asks. After a minute passes and I don't respond, she answers, you don't know. Then she begins clearing the table. I think to myself, maybe she's right. But then again, maybe not. I become obsessed with finding out what's going on. Whenever I'm not working, my new hobby is driving around the neighborhood. Over the next few days, I continue to see the same pattern. Different streets that I'd driven down just days before were now deserted. Something was definitely going on around here, but why was I the only one who seemed to think it was strange? I decide to mention it to Mindy again. You're just being paranoid, she tells me. I can tell that she's starting to get annoyed with me. I need to talk to that realtor I keep seeing. I have some questions for him. Mindy angrily replies, Jeff, will you leave that man alone? He's just doing his job. You're going to end up getting arrested. But my mind's made up. The next time I see him, we're going to have a little chat. The opportunity presents itself the following day when I head home to grab some lunch while I'm on my break. I see him at yet again another house in my community. It's right across the street from mine. He's in the process of hammering a for sale sign into the freshly mown lawn. As I cross the street, I get a feeling of deja vu, like I may have known the people who used to live there. I grab the man by the shoulder and spin him around. I need to talk to you. He doesn't answer. He just stands there composed, giving me that same creepy smile. What in the hell is going on around here? Why are all of these houses for sale? And where's... My mind draws a blank. I swear I was just over here the other day, but for the life of me, I can't remember who used to live here. Damn it, I can't remember their names. Where are the people who used to live here? I ask him. He just stands there remaining silent. Then I catch a glimpse of a shadow in one of the upstairs windows. I look away for a second, and when I glance back, it's gone. Beads of sweat start to form on the man's forehead, and finally he parts his lip the tiniest bit and tells me while still smiling, I don't know what you're talking about, sir. Then he leans a little closer and whispers, I can't tell you. Leave while you still can. Suddenly a garbage can tumbles to the ground next door as a stray cat leaps out from behind it. It causes the man to jump, which in turn makes me jump. He bends down and picks up a rubber mallet from the grass that he used to put the sign up. He fumbles with it, dropping it twice. Suddenly he seems like a nervous wreck. Sir, you're mistaken. It's just the economy, he assures me. Then he grabs the rest of his signs, scrambles to the car, and throws them into the trunk. Then he speeds away. After dinner that night, I call my friend Mike. Hey, can you remember the name of the guy who used to live across the street from me? I ask him. Are you talking about Jim? Yeah, Jim, I agree, even though I'm not sure. His whole family just up and moved today, and they're not the only ones. Do you think that's strange? Not really, he answers. Well, I think something is going on, so I want to check out one of these vacant houses. Will you come with me? He says that he will, and we make plans to meet up later tonight after it gets dark. When we meet up later that night, he hops into my car, and then we drive around the block a few times until I see a house that looks familiar. When we see a shadow in one of the windows, Mike suggests, maybe we should go knock on the door first, just to make sure it's empty. I think about it for a second. I'm almost certain that it's empty, but if someone was to answer, what would I say? I'd seem like some weirdo or something. The house is in a fairly new part of the community. There are empty lots on both sides of it where other homes are in the process of being built. The home we enter is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath Cape Cod with a fenced-in yard. I bust out one of the rectangle windows in the door, then carefully stick my hand in and reach down to unlock it. Deja vu hits me as we walk through the front door, and my eyes immediately land on a gold locket sitting on top of the fireplace mantel. I wander over to check it out while Mike searches the kitchen. I don't even know what we're looking for. I lift the locket and open the clasp, revealing a photo of a little girl and boy. My heart skips a beat. I know I've seen those kids before. I just can't remember where. I show Mike the locket, but he says that he doesn't recognize the kids in the photo. I slide it into my pocket and we search the rest of the house. I don't know what the shadow was that we saw, but the house is empty. Feeling defeated, I head home. The next morning, I call off of work and beg my wife to come with me to the realty office. I told you what that realtor said to me yesterday. Something weird is definitely going on around here. I tell her that I'm going with or without her, so she finally just agrees to come with me. The office is empty when we arrive, except for one woman sitting at a desk. I ask her the same questions I asked the man the previous day. "Sir, you're mistaken. It's just the economy," she replies in a robotic tone. That's the same thing the man said to me. But that answer isn't good enough, so I proceed to ask more questions. My wife finally has to pull me out of there when the lady threatens to call the cops. Saturday morning, I get up bright and early and get ready for my fishing trip with my neighbor, Mr. Palmer. I pack lunch for the two of us, some sandwiches, a fruit cup, and a bag of chips. Then I pack the cooler full of ice and shove in some bottled water, sodas, and of course a few beers. I scarf down a scrambled egg and bacon breakfast sandwich before grabbing my fishing gear and heading out to the car. Mr. Palmer is sitting on his front porch with a cup of coffee. "How long have you been waiting?" I question. He assures me he hasn't been waiting long. He slides into the passenger seat of my car while I load up the trunk. When we get to the lake, I debate whether I should ask Mr. Palmer about the vacant houses. He doesn't get out much, and I'm not sure that he would have noticed them anyway, but I decide it can't hurt to ask. "Have you noticed all of the vacant houses in the area?" He nods his head. "Yeah, but have you been seeing more than usual?" I ask. "I can't say that I have, but I've noticed that there aren't as many kids around. Them Jenkins boys are always a pain, but I haven't seen them lately." I think to myself, the Jenkins boys. I know I've heard the name before, but I just can't put a face to it. I'll have to ask my boys about them when I get home, along with the picture of the two kids in the locket that I took from the vacant house. I changed the subject. "How's Mrs. Palmer? I haven't seen her in a few days." He replies, "She's been feeling a little under the weather." "Well, tell her that I hope she feels better," I say. We spend most of the day fishing. I usually don't have much luck, but today I catch a nice-sized salmon. Mr. Palmer doesn't do too bad either. He manages to catch 3 trout. When the sun starts to go down, we pack up and get ready to leave. Once we pull into the driveway, I offer to help Mr. Palmer carry his stuff in, but he refuses. "I'll see you for dinner tomorrow night," I call after him as he rushes across the lawn with his things. As I collect my stuff from the car, I notice that Mr. Palmer forgot his fishing pole in the front seat. I leave it there and figure I'll just return it to him tomorrow when he comes over for dinner. "How was the fishing trip?" Mindy asks as soon as I walk through the door. I hold up the salmon I caught with a huge smile on my face. She laughs and says, "I guess we're having fish for dinner." The boys are sitting in the living room playing video games, so I go over and sit down on the couch between them. "Do you know these kids?" I ask them, pulling out the locket from my bag. They pause the game to take a look. Elijah says, "Oh yeah, that's, Who is that?" he asks Isaiah. Isaiah glances at the photo and answers, "They look familiar. I don't know, maybe they go to our school." "What about the Jenkins boys? Do you know them?" I question. Elijah thinks about it for a minute, then replies, "I don't think so." Then he gets up to go get a drink. "What about you?" I ask, looking at Isaiah. "Nope." Just then, Elijah returns, and as he's sitting down, he begins to scratch at a spot on his leg. And that's when I notice the discolored scar. Then it hits me. The Jenkins boys live across the street from us. Well, they used to, until the other day when they just disappeared. And last summer, one of them caused Elijah to break his leg while they were playing football. Why don't the boys remember them? And why did I not remember them until just now? I know I stormed over there and got into a huge argument with their dad because his sons always play so rough. The police even had to be called. That's not something you just forget. I head upstairs to my room and close the door. Then I go into full panic mode. What is going on? Why is it that every time a for sale sign gets put up, no one can remember the people who used to live there? The next afternoon, we head to the grocery store to pick up the items needed for our Sunday dinner later that night. Mindy is making one of my favorites, chicken cordon bleu with garlic mashed potatoes and fried broccoli. But I don't even think I'll be able to enjoy it with everything that's on my mind. I aimlessly follow Mindy around the store, pushing the cart close behind her. Then we purchase our groceries and head home. I ask Mindy if she needs help with anything in the kitchen. She tells me that she doesn't, so I grab the bag of cheese doodles and a can of Pepsi and head over to the couch to watch football with the boys. I try to act like my normal self, but it's hard to when you don't know how much longer you'll be around. The pleasing aroma of dinner fills the air promptly at 6 p.m. The boys set the table while I go next door to get the Palmers. They must have forgotten about dinner at our house tonight. It wouldn't be the first time. I don't see their car in the driveway, but I ring the doorbell anyway. After a few tries and no answer, I knock loudly on the door. Mindy peeks her head out of our screen door and yells, "Dinner's getting cold!" I jog back over and tell her that they're not home. She shuts and locks the screen door behind me, then heads to the phone to give them a call. I sit down and plunge into my dinner once I see that the boys have already started eating. No one answered. "Do you think something's wrong?" she asks me. I think back to yesterday while we were fishing and how Mr. Palmer told me that Mrs. Palmer was feeling under the weather. I don't want Mindy to worry, so I say, "No, honey, I'm sure everything is fine. They probably just forgot and had something else to do." Mindy takes a plate of apple pie over to them later that evening, but there's still no answer. The next day, when I'm leaving for work, I see Mr. Creepy Realtor putting up a for sale sign next door. I drop my stuff right there in the driveway and dart over there. I grab him and slam him to the ground. Then I snatch him by his shirt and pull him real close to me so that our faces are almost touching. "What were you trying to tell me? I know something is going on around here. Tell me what you know." He yanks himself from my grasp, and this is the first time that I've seen a look other than that creepy smile on his face. He seems scared. He gets up and dusts himself off, then he puts the creepy smile back on his face. I realize after a closer look that it's not so much a creepy smile as it is a fake smile that he seems forced to put on. "You don't know what you've done. You've killed me." I look at him confused as he rushes to his car and then races away. After work on my drive home, there are even more vacant houses than ever before. Something sitting in the passenger seat catches my eye. It's a fishing rod. Where did that come from? I think to myself. I know I did go fishing the other day, but I'm sure that I came home and put mine away. Yes, I saw it hanging on the wall in the den last night. Wait a minute. Didn't I go with someone? Who was that? And what were we talking about? Suddenly, a troubling realization hits me, and I speed home in a panic. I swerve into the driveway and rush next door. I pound on the door, and when I see a shadow walk past the living room window, I peek inside. But I see nothing, so I go from window to window and don't see anyone in there. I run home and bust through the door screaming, "We're leaving. Pack some things for the boys and we'll stay at a hotel until I find out what's going on." But Mindy refuses to leave. "Everything is fine. I'm not going anywhere." Just then, there's a knock at the door. "Don't answer it," I warn Mindy. "Will you stop it? You're being ridiculous." She opens the door and greets the person with a friendly smile. "Can I help you?" she asks. As Mindy steps aside to invite them in, I don't recognize the face, but instantly recognize the creepy fake smile and suit, and he's holding a for sale sign. I freeze in fear, knowing that my family will be the next to mysteriously move away and be forgotten. Subscribe for new original stories 3 times a week. See you next time on
Nina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.